What is up, winning team? Welcome back to us delving into the lies that scientists today are telling. This is a part of an overall series. We're currently reading a book, Beyond the Veil, exploring the bubble theory and the fourth dimension by Jamil Chamberlain. We're currently just finished chapter 12 before I got into this. If you want to know what this is all about, and check out part 1. But essentially, this lady, Sabine Hossenfelder, who is a theoretical particle physicist, has critiqued her own area of physics. She works in developing scientific theories. She's very much working at the forefront of science. I've said to you guys before, quantum mechanics, that kind of area of science is very much the forefront of science. You know, the fourth dimension, the things that we can't explain, as we've been discussing, the fact that in our current universe, we don't know, 95% of our universe is made up of dark matter and dark energy. We only know that there's dark matter and energy because of the evidence, the things that we experience, the anomalies, and also the things that we can't explain that exist in our universe, but we still don't know what those things are. And now we're kind of, busting the buttons off, if you like, off of this whole, a lot of the fundamentals of what we believed in the first place, of which you guys know I've been discussing. And we also theorized alongside the book, the author, he suggested that our theories of even gravity itself, which if you think is one of the most fundamental theories, the concept that we're all here sitting and I'm not just floating in the sky right now, but I'm sitting and whatever, and you are the same, and the way out, the walls are remaining together, even my body being held together. Theoretically, scientifically speaking, if there was a shift in gravity, even the smallest one, our bodies wouldn't even hold together the way that they do. So these are some fundamentals that I had already told you guys I was questioning, the author was even questioning. And so now we're going to continue with her paper, which starts off that we now live in a grip of post-factualism. She's calling it post-factualism. Would seem naturally repellent to most physicists, but in championing theory without demanding empirical evidence, we're guilty of ignoring the facts ourselves. So we started in part 1 in the previous video, where she kind of talked about this reproducibility crisis, and how a lot of scientists, they've had to put in place things because scientists have lied about their answers. So they've had to find ways to make sure that when somebody produces certain work, that we can say that that work is actually truthful and valid, and reproducible. I use my own research as an example of that. So check that out in part 1. And for the rest of all of that, we're going to continue on. Just so that we don't start at a random word, I'm going to read a couple of lines behind, and then we'll continue. So if you want to know what all of this, anything of this is about, this whole series and everything, go and check out the introduction video in the playlist below, and it'll all make sense. I'm going to link this video in the playlist itself after I've done all the review. So you can also, in the video that I'm talking about that I saw, this is where I found the link to this paper. So you can get access to everything for yourself. You guys know, as a teacher and also as a captain of the winning team, I believe in being a lifelong learner and you studying everything for yourself. Don't just take what somebody says. Do it for yourself to make sure. Don't just listen to what I'm saying. Go and look at the things that I'm bringing up for yourself and make your own judgment. I promise you, it's one of the greatest strategies in the game of life. So let's go. So we'll go back here. She just finished talking about the reproducibility crisis. She's now gone on to say, but we have a crisis of an entirely different sort. We produce a huge amount of new theories, and yet none of them is ever empirically confirmed. Let's call it the overproduction crisis. We use the approved methods of our field. See, they don't work, but don't draw consequences. Like a fly hitting the window pane, we repeat ourselves over and over again, expecting different results, which, as I said to you guys, is literally the definition of insanity. But we talk a lot about how you kind of have to flirt with insanity a little bit as a scientist to make scientific discoveries. Check out part 1 for that explanation. Some of my colleagues will disagree we have a crisis. They tell you that we made progress in the past few decades, despite nothing coming out of it, and that it's normal for progress to slow down as a field matures. This isn't the 8th century, and finding fundamentally new physics today isn't as simple as it used to be. Fair enough, but my issue isn't the snail's pace of progress per se. So this is where we're starting now. with fair enough, but my issue isn't the snail's pace of progress. It's the current practices in theory development signal a failure of the scientific method. Let me illustrate what I mean. Oh, I love this. This is what's good about when you get scientists to explain stuff, because scientists know you have to explain every why. Like, a lot of people accuse me of yapping in my videos, right? And I'm like, honestly, a lot of the time I just think people are just not that level of critical thinking. I'm explaining, a lot of time I make my videos quite long or extended, or I have to split into series, because I have to silence all the other questions and all the other lies that are kind of come up against what I'm saying. So I have to produce a foundation and show that I didn't just pull this out of my ass. I actually thought about it and I have reasoning. So that's why my videos tend to be quite long, because I'm setting the foundation. That's why I have to do a whole sub-series before I can make a point sometimes, just so that when people are like, well, how did you even come to that? I'm like, well, there's like 10 videos in another series where I talk about the foundations of how I got there. So this is what I love about scientists. A similar thing we see in this book here by Jamil. Let me illustrate what I mean. In December 2015, the LHC collaborations CMS and Atlas presented evidence for a deviation from standard modern physics at approximately 750 JeV resident mass. So I have no idea what any of that means. So just bear with me a second and I will update us all. Oh, this is fascinating. And I'll tell you why this is extra juicy, right? I swear to you, my life is a movie. Because recently, right? So this is all about particle collision, right? This and CERN. And it's insane because just prior to starting to record videos today, I was having a conversation with somebody that I met through YouTube when I was talking about One Piece, right? Come to find out, this individual who I'm currently speaking to, right, was talking to me about exactly this, about CERN this morning. We were talking about how we both think that about science and how science and God overlap. And this is so interesting. So we were just talking about CERN. Now this lady's talking about CERN. I love it here. So basically, I'm going to try to simplify all of this because it's kind of a whole thing. But the long and short of it is there was an anomaly basically in data collected at the Large I can't say it properly, Hadron Collider in 2015, which could be seen as an indication of new particle or resonance, right? So they found this new particle essentially. However, in the end, they concluded, whoever, Atlas and CMS, who she's referring to, they eventually concluded that they did not confirm the existence of this new F particle, they were calling it. Instead, they decided it was a statistical fluctuation, which was actually something that within the scientific community, people weren't exactly happy about. People had different opinions. So we're just going to leave it at that for the sakes of reading through this. Otherwise, we're going to have to do another whole video. But I just wanted to give my own quick summary. We'll continue with what she said. So in December 2015, she's about to say essentially what I just said, the LHC collaboration, CMS and Atlas presented evidence for a deviation from the standard model physics at at approximately I'm trying to remember what hold on a minute, 1 second. Where was I? From the standard model physics at approximately 750 GeV, which is giga electron volt, resident mass. The excess appeared in the 2-photon decay channel and had a low statistical significance, right? So again, how they come to these is another thing that I question, but we won't get into that. It didn't look like anything anybody had ever predicted. This and herein lies the problem, because scientists are so believing that we know exactly what we're talking about. So I already feel like this is probably why they were questioning and we're not happy to accept this as a new particle, but just a statistical fluctuation, right? It didn't look like anything anybody had ever predicted. By August 2016, new data had revealed that the excess was merely a statistical fluctuation. But before this happened, high-energy physicists produced more than 600 papers to explain the supposed signal. That's insane. 600 papers to then come down to the conclusion that a statistical fluctuation is sketch. Many of these papers were published in the field's top journals. None of them describes reality. Now, the particle physics community has always been subject to fads and fashions, though this case was extremely both in number of participants and in their haste. There have been many similar cases before. In particle physics, jumping on a hot topic in the hope of collecting citations is so common it even has a name. ambulance chasing, referring to the presumably apocryphal practice of lawyers following ambulances in the hope of finding new clients. I like that analogy because that actually makes sense. One could argue that even if all of the proposed explanations for the 750 giga-electron volt bump were wrong, they were still good exercise for the brain. A kind of fire drill for the real deal. Oh, this is just... I'm not convinced this is time well spent. But either way, ambulance chasing isn't what worries me. What worries me is that this flood of papers is a stunning demonstration for how useless the current quality criteria are. If it takes but a few months to produce several hundred explanations, which she's also put in quotes, for a statistical, or not quotes, what's the ones where it's just one and not two of these things? For a statistical fluke, then what are the explanations good for? I'm not good with English, by the way, guys. I just like to point that out. Language isn't my thing. Numbers, equations, and all that. All of these rules of how we speak and how we write and how words are said, it's not my cup of tea. And a lot of it's quite illogical, right? And it's not only theoretical high-energy physics. You can also see this in cosmology, where models for inflation abound. Theorists introduce one or several new fields and potentials that drive the universe's dynamics before decaying into normal matter. Current observational data can't distinguish the different models, and even if new data comes in, there will be infinitely many models left to write papers about. By my estimate, the literature presently contains several hundred of these. This is interesting. So essentially what she's saying is we're doing a whole load of nothing, which is what I actually do believe is happening a lot. And people are so well programmed by the education system and the powers that be that scientists are so hard working on the things that matter. No, they're not. No, they're not. They don't, honestly, for the most part. There's a couple of things that could be happening. And I've said this before. I've said it for years on this channel before I even started talking about science like this. Right? They're either doing things because they're just being paid and they want to be... What's the best case scenario for most scientists is that they end up working in a field that matches up with something that somebody with a lot of money wants to research. So the scientist can get paid to do the work that they want to do, and the person can get paid... I'll give you guys an example, right? Let's say that you own a company like over here, GlaxoSmithKline, right? Which is a huge company. And one that people would suggest you go, someone like me who studied chemistry should go and work in. My best case scenario is I meet like the CEO of GlaxoSmithKline, and I've been the person who's come up with the concept of Ozempic, right? And I have all I need is 10 million to work on this research. I can get it done in 2 years, and I will let GlaxoSmithKline be the sole owners of Ozempic, right? That's the perfect case scenario as a scientist. So there's always, as I've said to you guys before, there's always, you need the scientists who want to do the work, and you need the people who have the money and invested interest. I'll give you guys the perfect example, my dream PhD, which actually came out, and if ever I decide to, I doubt I will, but listen, if any of the groups in question are listening for whatever reason, hit me up. But my dream PhD is this: to work on airplane engines with Rolls-Royce. And you might sound insane, but that's actually was the degree. It was July, not last year, the year before. I went on to phd.org, which I always say, if you've got a degree, a first degree especially, you should go to phd.org. A lot of these PhDs are paid for. So this degree course that I was looking at, this PhD course, this is why when I talk to parents in my job as a teacher, and they don't listen when I say this stuff because it's too far out of what they expect and what was happening in their time. I'm like, you're advising your child to go into debt when they could literally get the paid PhD. So you are paid, and the PhD is paid for the duration of doing it. And you get to work with the company. So in that, Rolls-Royce was funding as part of their research for their jet engines, right? And it was all about working on the casing of the jet engine, which is just insane. You guys know, it's either jet engines or it's quantum mechanics. Those are my two favorite areas of science. And because they have the interest that they want to improve their engines. They want to improve either the speed, maybe the money that it costs to build the casing around the engines, or whatever it is, right? The longevity, whatever, right? They need scientists. They're the ones with the money. We're the ones with the skills. And hence those two things come together. So that's why this stuff is really important. Because think about what it takes. Who is funding? This is my question. Who is funding, and who has the time? Who has funding this, and why are they funding it? Because the only reason these people have the time to be writing these papers is because somebody has to be funding it, because we all have to live, right? We all have to make money to live, to whatever. So this for me is truly fascinating. So where are we? By my estimate, the literature currently contains several hundred of these, just a whole bunch of nothingness, basically. For each choice of inflation fields and potentials, one can calculate observables and then move on to the next fields and potentials. The likelihood that any of these models describes reality is vanishingly small. It's roulette on an infinitely large table. But according to current quality criteria, that's first-rate science. This syndrome of behavior also arises in astrophysics, where theoreticians, that's a word I've never heard before, I guess I could, okay. Theoreticians conjure up fields to explain the cosmological constant, which is well explained by it being a constant, and suggest more and more complicated hidden sectors of particles that may or may not make up dark matter. It isn't my intention to indiscriminately dismiss all this research as useless. In each of these cases, there are good reasons why the topic is worth investigating and may lead to new insights. Reasons I don't have the space to go into here. But in the absence of good quality measures, the ideas that catch on are the most fruitful ones, even though there is no evidence that a theory's fruitfulness correlates with its correctness. Let me emphasize that this does not necessarily mean any one individual scientist modifies behavior to please peers. It merely means that the tactics that survive are those that reproduce. Ooh, many of my colleagues believe this forest of theories will eventually be chopped down by data, but in the foundations of physics, it has become extremely rare for any model to be ruled out. The accepted practice is instead to adjust the model so that it continues to agree with the lack of empirical support. If I understand this correctly, is she saying, because this is something I used to also think when I was studying science, right? And hence why I believe in the battle of science between God always reigns supreme. I used to think that the higher level you go in this type of stuff, the more there's approximation, the more your calculations are using and equations are using approximations, assumptions, and the more we just kind of end up stopping at the point of, but we're lacking empirical evidence. So we've brought up all of this theory, but as long as we recognize that we're lacking in empirical evidence, then we can kind of still push the theory and still seem to be being productive. Is that what she's saying? Because, oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, the dominance of fruitful and easy amendable hypotheses has consequences. We're going to talk about that as the next part. That's quite fascinating. Because the reason why I'm thinking about it so much is because I remember when I was doing my paper, right? I remember something that my professors were saying to me at the time. They specifically said, because I did really well in it, by the way. Like, I did really well, actually. They specifically said, if you want to do really well, what you need to do at the end is show and talk about how the work you've done, like basically pick apart your own work and critique it to show that even though you've shown whatever you've shown, also very much address what you haven't shown and what you haven't proven. Which obviously to me was just being a smart scientist and just a smart human being. We should always critique ourselves. Oh, they're leaving. But I'm also now thinking, at what point is that not good enough as for us to call ourselves a factual field? Is my question. Because at a certain point, if we're lacking empirical support, so this is the physical, tangible evidence, to a degree, and I agree with her, to a degree, yes, we have to understand that we're only going to be able to get so far so fast, and only going to be able to show so much so soon. But at a certain point, are we just bouncing off of theories that all are lacking in empirical evidence? And are we essentially saying we're just building off these theories off of nothing? Is my question. Now, this is crazy. This is crazy. And to think that 12 hours from now, I'm going to be leading a Bible study. Oh my gosh, my life is a movie. Okay, so let's continue. We're going to continue in part 3, because the next thing she goes on to say, the dominance of fruitful and easy amendable hypotheses has consequences, which is some of the ones I've just kind of mentioned. Let's go on to that in the next part. So I'll see you guys. If you're enjoying this, like I said, check out the whole series. We're reading through the book. We're going to go back to the book after I get through this paper. So stick around, stay tuned. Everything's all linked in the description box. And let's continue this thought track. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next stage of our thoughts here. This is insane. This is insane. Anyways, you guys, if life's a game, let's play to win. God bless you all. God loves you. I love you. And I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.